Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah, the 48th Ismaili Imam, widely known as Aga Khan III, wielded absolute authority over millions of followers across the globe until his death in 1957. A documented rupture exists between the doctrines he preached and the rituals he received. The Aga Khan claimed divine authority over the afterlife, yet upon his death, his body was subjected to a mortal ritual of absolution. We are deconstructing the Nizari Ismaili Imamat by examining the collision between these codified doctrines of absolute spiritual authority and the documented physical reality of the Imam's final rites. The foundational logic of the sect's soteriology, the science of salvation, depends entirely on the Imam's status as an infallible intermediary between the believer and the divine. Analyzing this contradiction reveals a structural tension within the Imamat, a conflict between a legally infallible institution and its vulnerable human leader. The theological context for this authority was established on February 20, 1910, in Rajkot, India. Addressing his followers, the Aga Khan delivered the Kangi Farman, a set of private commands transcribed in the secretive Kochki script. The Aga Khan claimed cosmic power, stating, "Do not ponder the future. Heaven and hell to give is in my hand." This is the doctrine of Mazhar. The Imam mirrors Allah's attributes onto the world, functioning as the direct distributor of grace. This mechanism theoretically bypasses standard Islamic concepts of divine judgment, allowing the Imam to perform the role of an infallible judge while still on earth. Followers are taught that a single didar, a glimpse of the Aga Khan's physical form, washes away all accumulated sins. The doctrine moves the moment of ultimate judgment from an abstract hereafter and consolidates it into the literal hands of a living human sovereign. This high theology is operationalized daily through a ritual known as Chanta. Looking at the mechanics of the ritual, we see a specific exchange. The Imam's authorized representatives, known as mukis and kamadiyas, sprinkle holy water on the adherent in exchange for a mandatory cash fee. The theological promise underwriting this transaction is immunity. Followers are assured that any sin forgiven via Chanta is exempt from divine questioning on the Day of Judgment. This economy is maintained at scale. An average adherent will undergo this monetized ritual between 2,000 and 5,000 times over their lifespan. The obligation does not end at death. The ritual and its associated fees is administered posthumously to ensure the departed soul secures final forgiveness. The Chanta system takes an abstract theological belief about divine light and engineers it into a continuous economic infrastructure of earthly absolution. This rigid hierarchy is a modern development, cemented not by Holy Scripture, but by British colonial law in 19th century Bombay. Prior to 1866, the Khojas were a syncretic Indo-Persian community. When the Aga Khan attempted to enforce mandatory financial tithes, many caste members actively resisted. This friction culminated in the 1866 Aga Khan case. Dissenting leaders sued to protect communal properties, dragging the theological dispute into the secular legal arena. Justice Joseph Arnold ruled against the dissenters, officially declaring the Khojas to be Shia Imami Ismailis and handing the Aga Khan absolute legal ownership of all communal property and revenue. By forcing a legal definition onto a hybrid community, the court engineered a strict religious sect. The followers were now permanently, legally bound to the Imam's centralized hierarchy. The Aga Khan's absolute divine authority over his followers' souls and their wallets was guaranteed by the secular jurisprudence of the British Raj. In 1957, the death of Aga Khan III exposed a fracture in this established model. He was entombed here at his mausoleum in Aswan. Before his burial, a documented funeral rite took place. The Aga Khan's body was administered the Chanta by a mukhi, one of his own followers. The theological purpose of this act was explicit. The ritual was performed so that the departed soul of the Imam may be forgiven. This creates a severe contradiction. The divine guide required an earthly subordinate to trigger his own salvation. Contrast this event directly against his 1910 Kangi Farman. The man who proclaimed heaven and hell were his to give was receiving the exact ritual he sold to followers to guarantee his afterlife. The moment of physical death stripped away the imamat's theological insulation, revealing a systemic fracture in its claim to ultimate infallible authority. The Aga Khan's death rites collide with orthodox Islamic theology. Quranic verse 3135 poses a direct question: "And who can forgive sins except Allah?" This verse explicitly reserves the power of absolution for Allah alone. It denies the validity of any secondary human intercessor. Yet the reality for the Ismaili community post-1957 involved weeks of collective maghfarat, prayers recited by followers pleading for the deceased imam's salvation. The necessity of a community praying for the salvation of their imam contradicts the concept of an infallible mazhar. A divine intercessor does not require the intercession of his flock. These post-death rituals operate as an involuntary theological confession, a physical, communal acknowledgement of the imam's mortal vulnerability. We have examined two deeply intertwined structures: a fragile theological claim to divine authority, reinforced by a legally untouchable temporal infrastructure. Despite the theological paradox exposed at Aswan, the modern imamat remains a globally recognized, immensely powerful, and highly centralized institution. The 1866 British court ruling succeeded where doctrine failed. It provided an impenetrable legal framework that protects the imamat's assets, entirely insulating them from doctrinal contradictions. Today, the monetized Chanta system continues to function perfectly as an economic engine, even though its theological premise was compromised at the tomb. Secular jurisprudence can successfully codify temporal power and engineer a modern religious sect, but it cannot resolve the paradox of a mortal leader confronting his own end.